If you've ever wanted to see talking animals navigate New York City nightlife, a modern spin on a classic Greek monster, or an adaptation of a certain beloved indie comic book, prepare to be disappointed. You won't be seeing these planned animated movies anytime soon. If you don't want people to get angry about a film's cancellation, it's probably not the best idea to release a video celebrating the director and showcasing the amazing animation. Alas, that's exactly what Sony did with its never-finished version of Popeye. Genndy Tartakovsky was going to direct, and the preview footage showcased an evolution of the cartoony style of his Hotel Transylvania movies pushed to even wilder extremes.
So I feel like it's destiny that's brought me here to Sony Pictures Animation to make Popeye an animated feature.
But then Tartakovsky was removed from the project due to creative differences. Popeye stayed in development at Sony for a bit, but Tartakovsky was brought back in 2020 when the rights reverted back to King Features Syndicate. But just 2 years later, Tartakovsky told Decider that basically it's dead. In the late 90s, Disney's Secret Lab CGI division was busy at work on Wildlife, a loose adaptation of Pygmalion about an elephant navigating Studio 54-era New York club culture. That doesn't exactly sound like your typical Disney movie. It might have had better luck as part of the studio's Touchstone label, which is actually what the directors were hoping for. For a while, the rumor was that senior executive Roy Disney shut the production down because of a scene in which two gay characters make a joke about manholes. But co-director Howard Baker later explained that while there was indeed a manhole joke at one point, it was cut before Disney saw it, as was much of the more adult-oriented content. Instead, what really happened was that in the effort to make Wildlife a more traditional Disney film, it just became too messy and ended up pleasing no one. Announced by DreamWorks Animation in 2010, Me and My Shadow was a comedy about a boring man whose shadow drags him on an adventure. It was set to combine 3D animation for the physical world and hand-drawn animation for the shadow characters. Alas, it went through multiple delays and changes in directors before its ultimate cancellation. According to animator Matt Willemese, DreamWorks CEO Jeffrey Katzenberg didn't think that Me and My Shadow would be a big enough blockbuster. He even fell asleep during one screening, although, to be fair, he had just flown in from China. The shadow concept was temporarily revived as a potential live-action/CG hybrid film for director Edgar Wright, but that version became a victim of corporate restructuring.
Whoa! Casper was a B.O.O agent?
DreamWorks Animation's B.O.O, Bureau of Otherworldly Operations, endured easily the most down-to-the-wire cancellation of all the films on this list. 7 months before its planned June 2015 release date, it was removed from the schedule, supposedly to distance itself from the release of Inside Out. It was quietly shut down 2 months later, even though there was already official merchandise being produced. Jeffrey Katzenberg struck again. He was reportedly displeased with how the film was turning out. Even so, canceling an animated film that had already begun final rendering stages so close to its release feels awfully harsh. It seems that B.O.O was a victim of restructuring at DreamWorks, which was seeking a buyout and was purchased by Universal in 2016. Besides the Trolls series, animated musicals just couldn't catch a break at DreamWorks in the 2010s. Larrikins, about an Australian marsupial known as a bilby on an adventure across the outback, was the brainchild of Tim Minchin, the comedic songwriter best known for the Matilda musical. It was scheduled for release in February 2018 and boasted an all-star cast that included Hugh Jackman and Naomi Watts. But less than a year out from the intended release date, Minchin wrote on his website, "A couple of days ago, the animated film to which I've dedicated the last 4 years of my life was shut down by the new studio execs. It didn't all go to waste though. At least the character designs were eventually reused for the 2018 short film Bilby." The planned adaptation of Mort, Terry Pratchett's fourth Discworld book, was never officially announced, so Disney can't really be accused of overhyping it. Nevertheless, reports about its development were all over the internet in 2010.
Everybody's talking about it.
You might think that this cancellation was due to controversy over death being the main character of a Disney movie, but the truth is actually much more mundane. According to commenters on the Animation Guild's blog, the rights holders wanted Disney to make multiple Discworld films, but the studio was only interested in Mort. It also didn't help that the plan was to use traditional animation for Mort, and Disney had decided to move away from traditional animation following the underwhelming box office of The Princess and the Frog. The King of the Elves is a dark fantasy short story by legendary sci-fi writer Philip K. Dick, whose other stories have inspired the likes of Blade Runner and Total Recall. An animated adaptation of King of the Elves from Disney was announced in 2008 in the hopes of a December 2012 release. That version of the film was canceled by 2009, but the project re-entered development in 2011 with a new screenwriter, a new director, and a planned 2013 release date, which also came and went. There wasn't any dramatic cancellation in this case, just a slow disillusion. According to animator Clay Cadis, director Chris Williams lost interest in the film after a year, and though animators kept working on it after he left, it just never got to a place where it was ready for release. Pixar has a long history of completely reworking its films mid-production, sometimes even firing and replacing directors. But there's only been one time that the studio announced a new computer-animated project only to cancel it: Newt. Originally set for a 2011 release, Newt was going to be about the last two blue-footed newts on the planet, who hate each other but have to be together to save their species. If you replace newts with parrots, that plot is basically identical to Blue Sky's Rio, which happened to be in development at the same time and actually got released in 2011. John Lasseter has cited that similarity as being one of the reasons for the cancellation. Originally, Pixar considered its typical strategy of replacing a director for a project that wasn't working. But that potential replacement director, Pete Docter, had a different idea for a film he was much more passionate about: Inside Out.
I think it's all beautiful.
While hot off the success of 2009's Coraline, Henry Selick was hired by Pixar to set up his own stop-motion studio within the company called Cinderbiter. Its first project was to be The Shadow King, about a boy whose deformed hands make amazing shadow puppets. But the problem was that Pixar's typical style of reworking its computer-animated movies midway through production led to a ballooning budget when applied to a stop-motion animated movie. Furthermore, John Lasseter's producing style didn't mesh well with Selick's directing style. The good news here is that Selick has since regained the rights to The Shadow King, so perhaps one day it could get made and released if another studio is willing to take a chance on it. Disney has confidently promised many films before they were actually finished, but none of those was announced with as much prematurely confident hype as Gigantic at the D23 Expo in 2015. This musical version of Jack and the Beanstalk was set for release in 2018, and Frozen composers Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez performed one of the songs they'd written for it. There was even an Easter egg in Zootopia.
Anything you need, I got it. All your favorite movies. I got movies that haven't even been released yet.
That 2018 release date was delayed to 2020 before eventually being canceled altogether. There's never been an official explanation beyond Disney Animation president Ed Catmull saying that the story just wasn't working. John Lasseter, who stepped away from Disney due to sexual misconduct allegations a month after Gigantic was canceled, might still produce a version of the story elsewhere. Netflix has announced the development of a new Jack and the Beanstalk movie at Lasseter's Skydance Animation. Another victim of DreamWorks restructuring in the mid-2010s, Monkeys of Mumbai would have been an adaptation of the Hindu epic the Ramayana told from the perspective of Hanuman's army of monkeys, with Bollywood-style songs by Stephen Schwartz and A.R. Rahman. Monkeys of Mumbai's cancellation was simply a matter of business. As director Kevin Lima told Den of Geek in 2017, it had nothing to do with the movie and everything to do with the politics of selling the studio. Because DreamWorks used the film as a tax write-off, it would have cost tens of millions of dollars for any other studio to acquire the rights, thereby killing its chances of being revived elsewhere. Sony Pictures Animation's Medusa was set to be a sympathetic take on the snake-haired monster from Greek mythology. It was originally going to be directed by Lauren Faust, who's best known for creating My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic.
Oh my gosh, this is right up my alley. It's Greek mythology, it's magic, it's girl protagonists. These are all my favorite things.
Faust hasn't had the best of luck. She left Friendship is Magic after one season over creative differences and later had an original series canceled by Netflix before its completion. In 2023, she explained on social media that after she left Sony in 2015, Medusa went in a more Disney direction instead of my more cartoony approach. Unfortunately, that version also failed to get off the ground. Announced in May 2022, the Cartoon Network movie Driftwood was a space opera about a mouse-like creature named Clover trying to save her forest civilization. The announcement coincided with an optimistic article in Vulture about the studio that declared, "The big picture play is for CN Studios to position itself as an appealing destination for creators of new work." That optimism proved extremely short-lived though. Driftwood was canceled just 3 months after it was greenlit. It was a victim of cutbacks targeting animation and family programming at Warner Bros. Discovery, with dozens of original shows, many of them from Cartoon Network, deleted from HBO Max around the same time. The virtual band Gorillaz has built up a wacky mythology with its music videos and various online content, and it almost expanded this mythology into a movie. When Gorillaz went on tour in 2002, animator Jamie Hewlett announced plans for the band's second album to be the soundtrack to a feature film. Frontman Damon Albarn teased the title for the film, Celebrity Harvest, via an Easter egg on his other band Blur's album, Think Tank. No major animation studio was willing to risk spending so much money on something so dark, although ideas for the movie became integrated into the 2005 Gorillaz album, Demon Days. Albarn and Hewlett once again attempted to make a Gorillaz movie at Netflix in 2023, but it ended up becoming one of many animated projects canceled by the streamer. Jeff Smith's fantasy comic book series, Bone, has been the subject of multiple failed adaptation attempts. Paramount and Nickelodeon movies were attached to make an animated version in the late 90s before their option lapsed in 2000. Smith later revealed that Nickelodeon executives wanted to make the Bone cousins 6-year-old children and include Britney Spears music.
Like Britney Spears.
Exactly like Britney Spears.
Smith then held off on returning to Hollywood while he finished the comics. In 2008, Warner Bros. Picked up the rights for a CG/motion capture adaptation that promised to retain more of the source material's darker aspects. This version was in development for a decade, with writers and directors cycling in and out. After its options were exhausted in 2019, Netflix acquired the rights for a TV series, which got canceled 3 years later amidst massive layoffs in the streamer's animation department. More than a third of the sci-fi anime Dreaming Machine had been completed when its director, Satoshi Kon, died of pancreatic cancer in August 2010. Producer Masao Maruyama promised Kon that he would finish the film, but it struggled to find funding. By 2018, Maruyama decided that no other anime director in Japan could match Kon's talent, though he was open to seeking international collaborators. While no animated scenes of Dreaming Machine have ever been released, artwork and details about its story have been showcased in books and documentaries.